Hey there, this is Debbie Hodge from StitchStories.com here today to talk to you about a really wonderful spring into summer design, Rolling Hills. There's a whole bunch of green in it. Let me show you more details about how I designed it, what you get inside the kit, about stitching it. So if you take a look at the design, you see that there is just a whole lot of green there. There's two shades of green, a lighter green and more of a Kelly green. And when I designed this, I knew I wanted to get the green down first. It was important to figure out where the greens would be, and then I would get that established, and then I would be able to work my other colors in. So you can see the next most amount of color comes in the blues. There's two shades of blue here. They're very bright blues, and they're placed in a visual triangle. We've got the greenhouse, the little pond with a fountain, and the bird in the sky with the clouds. And a visual triangle is a great way, establishing a visual triangle with elements that repeat. In this case, it's the color blue, that can guide the eye around the design. The eye says, oh, that stands out, that stands out, that stands out. So your eye can be guided around. And a visual triangle is a great pattern to design it, a great shape, because the eye likes odd numbers. Visual triangles are just kind of nice for establishing flow through a design. So there's that blue in place. And then the next thing that I did was add the oranges and yellows. I knew that I was saving the red for the very last. That was going to be the color that I used in the least amount. Here's the other thing. You don't want to use every color in the same proportion. You want to be able to shake things up. The eye wants to see some repetitions, but they also want to see variety. So we've got a whole bunch of green, a little bit less blue, and then we got even less of the oranges and yellows that are in place. And then after that, I added the reds, which looks like we've got a visual triangle of red right through there. So let's talk about what you get when you get this kit. So all of our kits come with a detailed stitching guide, bamboo hoop, a tin. So here we have the bamboo hoop. The bamboo hoop measures, I think it measures, it's a little less than, I think it might be 7 3/4 inches inside, 7.5 inches. It's a bamboo hoop. Some people display it with it. Some people buy nicer hoops for display, but it's a great working hoop. And then you get the tin that has all the pieces. So we've got, the pattern is printed in color to by 10.5 inch square fabric. And this is printed in permanent color. The lines are kept small. When you stitch it, you will be covering them all up. So it's printed in color, and you'll just put it in your hoop, hoop it up. You'll be able to stitch it. Here's one of them in process. And in your tin are full skeins of DMC floss. There is enough with this kit to stitch the kit twice with all that floss. There's a little card that's got 2 needles on it and a needle minder. A needle minder has a magnet and something decorative, and you can set the decorative piece on top of your fabric, the magnet behind, and you'll see right now it stays there. And then when you are sewing, it's just a great place to put your needle down when you're changing thread. So that's what comes in the kit. Oh, let's take a look at the stitching guide too. So you get a little card with that on it. The stitching tin is really handy. I'm going to show you. So here's mine. I've already stitched this kit a couple times. So this is what it comes to look like once you get going. But the tin is so handy for organizing things. Stitching guide for Rolling Hills. Let's take a look at that. So there's a full color picture on the front that you can really get the details of, so that if you want to see exactly how I might have stitched it, of course you can always change things up and stitch them the way you want, but the photo gives you a really good look at how I stitched it for a reference. And then inside you get, if you've never embroidered, details on how to get started, exactly how to put things in a hoop, how to separate your floss. Here's a color key and a diagram. So I show you all of the stitches and colors that I would use for each piece of the kit. Over here, there's a section called New Stitcher Start here, where I give you some step-by-step for starting with easier stitches and moving on through. And I also always include quite a bit of tips. Like the greenhouse here is kind of fun. Take a look at the greenhouse. It's mostly stitched in light blue, but then the framing lines of the greenhouse have a whipped back stitch, so they're a little bit darker. So I tell you details like that. If you take a look here, you can see that these lines right through here are darker. That's because I whipped the lighter line with a darker blue. And if you don't know what a whipped back stitch is, right, I give you lots of details here, but on the back you'll have exactly how to do a whipped back stitch. So that's a stitching guide. They're always a nice heavy cardstock that you can, it's not going to get beat up. You're going to be able to find it, okay? So, so many fun stitches to stitch on this design. Take a look at it. These hills are done in a back stitch, which is really fun because it shows a lot of texture when you use a back stitch, as opposed to, if you take a look at this line right here for this hill and this hill, those are done with the outline stitch, which is thicker. And it doesn't have that same kind of texture. It's just, again, nice to have variety. This tree is outlined with the chain stitch in yellow, and the bird, I think, is done in split stitch for outlines. I have to take a look at the diagram. But the greenhouse is really fun to stitch, all those back stitches in there, and then whipping some of them. Little lazy daisies for these flowers right in the doorway of the greenhouse. Right here, a whole bunch of straight stitches. So this is a great place to get started if you want. You'll be stitching straight green stitches there. And the trees are fun. I think of them sort of like lollipop trees. So you've got here straight stitches surrounded by a split stitch, surrounded by lazy daisies, surrounded by those Ys. Those yellow Ys are done with a fly stitch and then surrounded with an outline stitch. And the tree is done with back stitch. We've got the wood grain in there. We've got the leaf stitch used for these leaves here, but these little leaves are done in lazy daisies. These plants have French knots for the blossoms. Again, more straight stitch. These layered grids are always really fun to do. If you take a look here, it's a dark green grid and then a light green grid over it. And I use the back stitch going from intersection to intersection. Somehow they really relax me to stitch those grids, just like with the back stitching on the greenhouse. This one's fun. Lots of little leaf stitches and French knots. With all of our designs, there are several different stitches that you'll use. This is not a design where you're going to be doing a lot of satin stitch or thread painting, or just having, you don't have to think a lot about, ooh, how am I going to get a really realistic effect? Instead, what we're going for is a sampler style, a style that's like the old samplers where you're using lots of stitches and you're just having fun with it. So let me think, is there anything else I want to share with you? Since I'm filming this on Valentine's Day, I'm not sure when you'll see it, but let's just, let's stitch a few of these hearts here. So I'm going to pull out my tin. With all of our designs, we're always working with 2 strands of floss, almost always. Sometimes when we're doing satin stitch, we're working with 4, but you split the floss out. So I'm just going to work with 2 strands of floss. I'm going to thread my needle. I lick it at first, and then sometimes if it's got a ragged cut, try to get a really nice straight, whoops, I'm not used to doing this under here. All right. Nice straight cut across it. And let me get a needle. Let's thread it up. And another thing that I do if I have a hard time threading it is I use floss conditioner, floss wax. We have beeswax in the store, so you can always just run the floss over this beeswax and it stiffens it up a little. It keeps it from knotting, but also it can help you if you're having a problem threading things. So then on the back, I don't like to put a knot on the back, so I will just go in here and anchor it by wrapping around some stitches that already exist, and I don't really want to leave a long tail, so everything hidden. So now I'll come on over here. These hearts are done with 2 small lazy daisies. So you come up at the bottom of the lazy daisy stitch, go back in at the same point, and then come up at the top of the oval of the lazy daisy. And now the key is we want to make sure that our yarn is looped around that, because we're going to pull it tight, but there's going to be a loop of yarn around it when we pull it. And then we're going to go right back in almost at the same spot to anchor it at the top. So that's the first one. Let me do one more. I'm going to come up right down here at the bottom, loop my thread around, go back in, bring the thread up at the top of the lazy daisy stitch. Now pull this tight and back down through. And I'll keep on stitching them. There's lazy daisies in several spots in this design. You can see them, these 3 blossom kind of motifs right in there. These plants right here, they're all done with the lazy daisy stitch. Got some lazy daisy stitches around the lollipop tree. And over here in the fountain, there's 3 petal. There's like 3 lazy daisies. You can see there's one vertical and two across. So it's just really fun to stitch because you do get to use so many different stitches. You've got the complete guide, got lots of fun colors to work with. And yeah, so that is Rolling Hills, a really fun design to display in spring and summer.